Jake had been in the woods for a long time, but he had never encountered anything like this. He was the most experienced of the Brother Scouts, and he thought he was invincible. This day, however, something went wrong. He crashed hundreds of miles from home in the wilderness where there was not a soul around. His phone died, and he couldn't use navigation. The only thing he could do was wait for help. As darkness fell, Jake began to set up camp. Suddenly he heard rustling in the bushes. He quickly hid in his tent and began to listen carefully. The noise grew louder and louder, and he heard someone's voice. "You're here, Jake. I know you're here." Jake was in a panic. That voice was scary and unfamiliar. He didn't know what to do. He began to think about what if he encountered wild animals or tourists looking for safety. He performed every action he knew, shouting, whistling, but no one responded. Just as Jake was about to flee the camp, suddenly the tent began to wobble. He felt something push him open the tent, and he saw an unusual light go off into the distant bushes. When the light was gone, the tent was empty. There were no footprints on the ground except for Jake's feet leading straight into the bushes. He started to follow the green ground, and he suddenly heard the same whisper. "I know you're here, Jake." Now he began to understand what was going on. He realized that someone or something was following him. He started to run away, but the same whispering began to get louder and louder. He heard a rustling in the thicket and saw that a living creature was following him. He turned quickly to look at his pursuer, but saw only himself. His eyes reflected the same figure, but a very frightening one. His heart was pounding as if it should have jumped out of his chest. He began to run even faster, but suddenly he found an empty shaft in his path. Jake started to jump, but stopped before the fate laid before him. There was no way back anymore. He decided to keep running. When he ran out of the mine, he saw his car. The handbrake wasn't on, and his car was going somewhere on its own. The wheel caught his eye, it was flat. He stepped closer to check it out, and then his stalker appeared before him. It was a figure Jake could see in his eyes. He was only a few feet away, and Jake could see his face. It was the same figure who had been stalking him. It was his hypocritical double. He was dead pale, his eyes were blank, and his clothes were tattered. Jake screamed and banged his head against his car, and he only woke up when the ambulance arrived on the scene. He was bundled up inside the car around his head, and his face was tattered. He was in shock and couldn't speak.